Hello and welcome to Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast hosted by myself, Greg Oram, and fellow Forest fan from across the Atlantic, Richard Spray. How you doing, Charlie?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Remember watching that as a kid. That was a great show.
Well, I always try to come up with something just to kind of liven us up a little bit. But we want to say to you, Happy New Year. We sincerely hope 2025 will be a brilliant one for each and every one of you. Thank you for your support in 2024. And we hope you'll stick around with us in the forthcoming year as well. Nottingham Forest ended 2024 in second place in the Premier League, but going into game week 20 are now third as Arsenal leapfrogged the Reds on New Year's Day following victory at Brentford. It'll be Forest who bring up the rear on this set of matches as they travel to Molinoux to face Wolves in the Monday Night Football. And under new manager Vitor Pereira, Wolves have taken 7 points from the last 3 games to climb out of the bottom 3. But with Forest being the informed team away from home, can the Tricky Trees make it 6 in a row? Also, back in July, we did our pre-season predictions. So at the halfway point, how do they measure up to reality? And do we now need to adjust our expectations and try and take a serious look at the pathway to Champions League football? Joining Richard and I for our first episode in 2025, we have Raf, the Random Pundit, and Danscape.
It's time to play the music. It's time to light the lights. It's time to meet the Muppets on the Muppet Show tonight.
I'm certainly not suggesting that you guys are a pair of Muppets. So
I was about to say, Greg. Is there a subtext?
Well,
Think called worse.
I thought, what can I play for the boys? I know, I've got just the thing. Raf, Happy New Year to you. How are you?
Happy New Year to you too, all as well.
Good. And Danscape, a Happy New Year to you. How are you?
Happy New Year to all you guys. I'm good. Feels like a long time since we've been on talking about Forest, even though there's been games and stuff. So it's good to be back in the habit.
It does. It does feel like it's been a bit of a while. Excuse me, because I've got the cough that's doing the rounds, and I've sound like a impersonator for Darth Vader on certain points. So don't forget to get involved in the comments. We want to hear what you think and give shout outs where possible. If you're tuning into this episode after we finish the live, either from YouTube or on Apple or Spotify, we thank you for joining us as well. Right, before we really get into it, we did it. Actually, no, let me say again. You did it. We managed to get, before 2024 closed, to over 1,000 YouTube subscribers. You probably heard me go on about it. I was really hopeful we could do it by Christmas Day. And then I said, look, if we can try and get to it by the end of 2024, that would be an unbelievable thing for us. So thank you very much to each and every one of you who comes along regularly, who has subscribed, who likes the video. I've got to say thank you, of course, to Wolfie at FFTV, because, he's been a huge supporter of ours. And on his channel, on New Year's Eve, on Grumpy Old Reds, he gave his usual push. And, like I said before, Wolfie gets a bit of flack from different quarters of the Forest fan base. But he's a genuinely lovely guy. He's a genuine fan. He doesn't deserve some of the crap he gets. He is a brilliant, brilliant person. All right. Thank you, Wolfie, for your push and for bringing some of your subscribers over to us. We hope we can live up to the expectations. We hope that we can give you the kind of content that's going to make you smile and laugh. And so that's our aim in 2025, to have contributors come and join us and speak to you about Forest and all the rest of it. So thank you once again for that. And if you need reminding, like and subscribe, guys. That is going to help us out. If you haven't done already, please do so. Before we get into the Wolves chat, guys, I've kind of got a plan of where we're going to go with this. We are going to be discussing the Wolves game, but because I think this kind of like carries over from 2024, December, we've got a whole bunch of monthly award nominations as well. Richard, you're going to take us through the save. Raf, you're going to take us through the goal. Dan, you'll take us through the player. I'll take us through the manager. So, Rich, on the save, who have we got?
Yeah, so we've got the, save from Matt Sells at Old Trafford, where he, just extended about as far as he could go to his right, clipped it off the bar, kept us in a position, I think that was right before halftime, if I'm not mistaken, and it really changes the trajectory of the match. So it was a huge moment for us to have Matt Sells get that save. If you remember against Wolves, now that we're going to be playing Wolves, when Greg and I were there, Raf was there, Dan was there, he had that opportunity, but he just missed it, couldn't get to it. So this, in a very similar way, was a pivotal moment. So it was great to see that, and he's been absolutely brilliant all season long. So incredible inclusion.
Brilliant. Raf?
Goal. It's just pure joy. And you look at what was done, and for me, all the submissions, this one was 3 bits of excellent technique, all put together from Morgan Gibbs-White, from his own half, to basically find that ball, which traditionally is up to Wood, but Wood excellently being able to cushion a header first time, to Alanga, who's running in tandem with him, to first time cushion the header back to Wood, who lets it bounce once and then just lofts it delicately over the keeper. Everyone making it look like it's totally effortless, and there is absolutely nothing the opposition can do about it. It's unbelievable. And for me, it should actually be goal of the month.
Well, it's in the nominations. Danscape?
So yeah, Morgan Gibbs-White is up for Player of the Month, which fully deserved on the back of his little injury sort of trouble and a little bit of doubt around him. Should he be the starting number 10? Should Anderson get that role? And basically from that second half at Man United, he just came out on fire, got his goal, a little bit of luck in that, got his assists there. And he's, it says here that he's up for 2 goals and 3 assists. But when you look at some of these goals, like that Chris Wood goal, there's other involvements there that just don't even count in that he's been instrumental in getting us these goals that have put us for 5 wins in a row. So fully deserved. And let's hope there's no curse afterwards for him and he carries on.
Well, we talk about the curse. We got the manager nomination for Nuno as well. He did win the award back in October, and it was following that the curse hit when we lost. And so I feel that Nuno probably is the standout manager from the 4 that have been nominated to lift Forest into second place to finish off 2024 with 5 wins in a row. I know we did have that defeat right at the start of the month, but I think on balance and looking at the other managers who have all got a claim as well, Nuno certainly I think will be many neutrals' choice for not just manager of the month but possibly even manager of the season. I mean, Arne Slot looks like he's going to take Liverpool to the title in his first season, and understandably will probably get the manager of the season award. But Nuno is in the conversation, and on every kind of video clip I see through Facebook or TikTok or wherever I'm looking, and people talking about football in the Premier League, the amount of Nottingham Forest chat that is taking place at the moment, and rightly so, is just incredible. So we're super proud of Matt Sells, of Chris Wood, and in fact, the team that scored that goal, of Morgan, of course, and of Nuno. I think a couple of awards definitely will be going back to the City Ground for the month of December. Congratulations to all of those guys there. Right. Okay, let's get into match thoughts. Richard, Wolves away at Molinoux, Monday Night Football. What are you thinking?
Well, going with the trajectory that we're on at the given moment, the momentum that we've got coming off of that December, which we just alluded to with the monthly awards, I feel pretty confident. I mean, of any time that we can beat these guys, this feels like the perfect time to do so. Maybe that's a kiss of death by saying that, but it's just been difficult to beat them. I mean, we didn't beat them when we saw the match live at the City Ground. We haven't beaten them since we've been back in the Premier League. So, yeah, it's finally about time to get that monkey off our back, as we have with Brentford, as we have with Spurs, and so let's continue that pattern of things and win. I think we're going to do it. I feel supremely confident, and they're missing their best player, which I know Raph will talk about when we get to the opposition reviews, or previews. So, yeah, I'm supremely confident going to this one as well.
A quick hello to Jay, who's in the comments. How you doing, Jay? Good to have you with us, and happy New Year to Dr. Anna. She says, thanks for all the brilliant content over the last year. You've kept me company through many hours at home or running around and doing work onwards to 2025. And Anna, all being well, will hopefully join us on a panel at some point in 2025, January or February. We've been chatting, haven't we, Anna? No pressure. But yeah, we want to have more female voices on our podcast. I think that I'll come out and say we want a bit of a balance. We want to try and make sure that there are female voices as well. Anna's been a fantastic supporter of ours, and she's someone that we'd love to welcome on. We'll look after you. I know that you were a little bit not sure. It's not for everyone, but Anna, we hope that you will come and join us very soon on a Talking Reds panel to maybe preview a match or talk a game afterwards or something like that. Gary's with us. Happy New Year to you, Gary, as well. Yeah, Caden Knives listening live for once. Happy to be part of the 1,000 brought over from Wolfie. Absolutely fantastic. And Mark Warwell, Happy New Year to you. Hope you go from strength to strength in 25, he says, with another £2 super thanks. Really appreciate you, Mark. Really grateful for you watching and for your donations. Thank you very much for those. All right, Danscape. Wolves under new manager now, last few games, going into this one on Monday night. What are your thoughts?
I think what's interesting about this one is, although we now talk about the Brighton model and trying to follow those teams, the Wolves model was actually the first model that I think Marinakis tried to put in place when he came in. And we were in the Championship, and he tried to make the George Mendes connection work and get the Portuguese players in and that sort of stuff. And we've now clearly sort of overtaken them by some way based on this season's league position. And Wolves have been floundering around, and it's almost like they've gone back to that model now. They've got their Portuguese manager in, and he's got a similar style of play to Nuno. He's come from Porto. So there are some similarities there. And I think mainly what the difference is that he's going to try and make them hard to beat, because it's far too easy to beat, far too easy to score against. So it is going to be a tough game. I think they're going to sit in, dig in, make life difficult, commit a lot of fouls, try and stop all of our, flair players. So it's going to be a tough challenge, and one that could end in a draw, but we'll see. I think I'm still very confident we can win this one. I'm
confident too. We're going away to a team that are just above the relegation zone, Raf. We've won 5 in a row, but can we make it 6, do you think?
Yeah, I do think so. And I'm always the level-headed, try to be a bit pessimistic and be surprised. Take one for the team for always saying that we're not going to win, and then we do. So I might have to do it again in our predictions. But I always like our chances when we face teams that need to score a number of goals to win because they're leaky at the back. That plays to our strength of being able to effectively block teams out. With Arsenal conceding a goal, I think we're still third best. We're nearly second equal best defence in the league. And we know that we can grab a goal or two if we need to. So very much a little bit like the old Spurs model. Wolves traditionally have been it's be 4-3 or something like that. Now, as Dan has said, they're trying to tighten up their defence. But when I come on to who's out for them, things might not be as robust at the back for them in their new look as it might be for us.
We're going to come to you, Raf, a little bit later to get a little bit more of an in-depth opposition view from a Forest point of view, of course. But we'll talk about the Forest team first, and we'll talk about how we might line up in terms of personnel and in terms of shape. I believe that an away game at Wolves, first game of the brand new year, and the first game going into the second half of the season, it's the perfect match for us, I think. And I know that Wolves have been a tricky team for us to get something from in the Premier League since we come up. We've lost. I don't think we've beaten them, in fact, have we? I think we drew early this season when we were there. I was there at the back end of the last season when it was 2-2, and Cunha did his thing. And but I think with the way that we've been playing, with our away form being what it is now, I really feel like 3 points is not just there for the taking, but it's really necessary for us to push on in the rest of this season, for the rest of this season. In fact, getting off to a defeat against a Wolves team who have, found a bit more form, if you like, under their new manager. I think getting off to a win is really important, because there's lots of questions still now about Forest, about, okay, so they've had a superb first half of the season. We know what about that. We're in the top 4, but can they now see it out? And there's been loads of stats and chat about, well, of all the teams that have been in the top 4 at Christmas, this is where they finished at the end of the season. Of all the teams that have been in the top 3 at the turn of the year, this is where they've been at the end of the season, and so on. And in fact, the data and the historical stats favour us getting a top 8 finish, definitely, top 7, and so on. And we can talk more about that later. But I just feel that if we're going to really push ourselves into not just the conversation, but genuine people's thoughts of a top 4 place, then a win against Wolves is an absolute necessity. So, thinking about shape, Richard, could this be where we're not sure about injuries, because Murillo obviously didn't make the last game. My gut feeling is that he'll be fit. So let's suggest he's fit. Do you think Nuno will go back to that 3 at the back system that he wanted to implement at the start of the game against Everton? Or do you think he might just go back to the back 4? What are you thinking in terms of shape and personnel?
My gut feeling is it's probably the back 4. I might consider the back 3 simply because of the height that Morato brings in, and I'm sure Dan will touch on this. They're the worst set piece team in defending set pieces in the Premier League. They really struggle with that, so you could take advantage of that opportunity through, obviously bringing Morato in and having him on that side of it. Plus, he's really good at defending set pieces as well, just based off of his height in conjunction with Milenkovic. So that would be the only primary reason I could see them wanting to, Nuno wanting to consider that, is somehow getting Morato on the field. Outside of that, I tend to kind of default to what's on the screen right now, which currently shows Chris Wood at striker. You've got, not Sosa. We'll assuming Callum Hudson-Odoi's healthy, because it seems as though that was going to be the case. They were keeping him out just in a precautionary manner through having a dead leg. You've got Gibbs White in the 10, Elanga on the other wing position on the right, Anderson, Dominguez in midfield, covering the 8 in a pseudo 6. And then you've got Williams at left back. And then I would probably slot in Murillo in place of Morato, and then Milenkovic and Aina. So kind of what we tend to see is probably the most common starting 11, other than Dominguez and Yates. Probably you can interchange those. So I could see the value of getting Yates involved, just because of the way that he can sort of, plug the lanes, be that disruptor like we've discussed many times. But I thought Dominguez played really well in the last match. I thought he did a lot of unsung things to help keep us, very stout and controlled at the back. So I wouldn't be disappointed to keep him in the starting lineup and go with that moving forward. But yeah, some iteration of this 4-2-3-1 that we know we've typically seen with us generally been the best starting 11 that we have on the team.
So you're suggesting maybe a 4-2-3-1. I thought that Morato was possibly man of the match against Everton. I thought he was terrific, really. And again, he just fills you with confidence. You think, okay, if we are going to be without Murillo, and it was a lastminute.com call as well, remember? It wasn't like it was planned to be without Murillo. He slotted in, and it was a great performance. So, Raf, thinking about formation, thinking about lineups, and thinking about Morato, has he made or staked a claim to keep his place because of that performance? Or is it simply, look, that doesn't come into play? Murillo's fit. We're going with the back 4. Morato, you're back on the bench.
I can't say that I am a fly on the wall of the dressing room and know exactly kind of how Nuno has got his man management set up with Morato and the expectations of what Morato has. So I'm shooting in the dark a bit, but with my unprofessional uninformed view, I think Morato goes back to the bench. It's everyone has a job. It's important. He's valued. It doesn't matter if he starts or he comes in at the end of the game, and he's lauded over social media for what he does as the doorman. So I don't think it's a problem him going back to the bench. And I think that given Wolves' inability in the air, generally, having Murillo back in, being able to ping balls forward as well, might actually be even more useful in this game than the normal of having a Murillo in there. So that for me is the key. We'll come on to their formation, but actually is what if you're saying, do we actually go to a back three? So we actually have all three central defenders in there. We will likely then be matching, going like for like formation wise with Wolves. And it might handle their wing backs a little bit better. Greg, you're muted.
I am muted. Sorry. I was coughing away and forgot to
Don't worry.
So I was just saying, do you think it will be a back three then, or do you think it'll be the four that
No.
Richards?
I think that any entertainment that Nuno had of doing a back three for his reasons at Everton, but that's because I think that they pose a height threat and a set piece threat. I don't think the Wolves do. And because he then had to go to a back four, which he didn't want to do, and it effortlessly dealt with Everton and we didn't concede a goal, I think he'll go, oh, yeah, all right, let's just go back to a back four. It just seems what works.
So
That's
is the
what
midfield, so are you bringing Yates back in or keeping Dominguez in place?
Oh, it's a coin toss. I would have said if this was under O'Neill and the Wolves team being a powder keg and just see them kicking off the whole time, the game was built for Yates. He would get one of them sent off in about half an hour, probably. But they seem to be very much more settled as a unit right now. Most of the inflammatory players are banned at the moment, or whatever it might be. And so I think it's very important in that midfield. If you have a blinder of a game, you get to keep your shirts. So I think Domingos stays.
Okay, over to you, Danscape. We have Morato watch in terms of clean sheets. He's only conceded the one goal against Man City, and most of his minutes have been with the last 20 minutes of the game. In fact, he got the whole game against Everton and still managed to not concede any past him. So am I barking up a brick wall here, if that's even the right thing to say about Morato keeping his place? Or are you with the boys on this kind of shape and formation?
I think barking's right when you're talking about Wolves, obviously, so that makes sense. Not sure about the brick wall bit. Just one interesting stat on Morato is he's only actually won one aerial duel in his season so far.
Really?
So he's actually won one and lost 8. So although he's a big guy, he's not actually dominating in the air like we perhaps think he is. He's the same stats as Alex Moreno, who's obviously little and large kind of comparison at the minute. So that's something just to keep an eye on, whether teams target that in any way. I think, look, he's done brilliantly. At the end of the day, again, I'm still very much of the view it's the team that's helping us defensively. It's not down to the centre-backs that's suddenly transformed our kind of defensive resolve. It's the fact that we're plugging all the gaps in the field. And Morato, what's good about him is that he's up to speed, the same as all the other defenders, so that he can just slot in and do exactly the same job. And so he's been great. I suppose, look, just for the sake of making the argument, to make the argument for the back three, I think is because you could say, well, actually, there are some similarities with Wolves and Brentford in that, they're not so good defensively. They're better going forward. They're better at kind of a little bit of flair players doing something out of nothing. And you could make an argument to say, do you go back to the Anderson, Gibbs, White midfield 2 and a back 3 to really get behind their midfield and try and create, chances that way? Because I think if you put Gibbs White in his usual number 10, they've probably got a holding midfielder who'll just sit on him and do a job on him. So, potentially, could you go for that? And I'm just sort of making this argument for the sake of something different, I suppose, but it could be that, and I suppose the other side I was thinking is we've struggled sometimes against the back 3 when the opposition play it, like Man United, where we've struggled a little bit at times with them getting behind our midfield as well when we've played the back 4. So I could see an argument for it, because we proved against Brentford that we can really make that work still as a very solid team, and then cause them problems in other ways and get Gibbs White and Anderson on the ball to influence the game more.
Well, whilst you were talking, for those that haven't got the screen in front of them, I've switched it around to show what that would look like with Morato, Murillo, Milenkovic in that three-man centre-back team. Williams and Aina operating down the flanks as de facto wing-backs. Anderson and Gibbs White into the midfield with that front three of Alanga, Wood and Hudson-Odoi. Now, I actually think this is going to be the team he plays. I think he's going to go to three at the back. And the reason why I think that, and I'm going to probably be wrong, is I think it does allow us to get our best players on the pitch. And it works a treat against Brentford. We know that we can, if we need to, change it up. So changing things, whether it's with 10 minutes to go to a kick-off or at half-time or with 20 minutes to go, Nuno is shown tactically he's become the master, I think, at that. And so I just feel like, as you say, Danscape, maybe matching them up a little bit more in terms of shape might be the way that he chooses to go. But look, again, it's just opinions, it's just thoughts, it's just on based on how Morato's played. It could well be that Murillo isn't fit. It could be that they want to leave him out again, and obviously that throws it out the window. And we do probably go back to that sort of same team that started at Everton per se. So, Raf, if I take that off, you did have a closer look at Wolves. We've looked at how you might set up. Over to you when it comes to Wolves.
Yeah. So, unlike Brentford, it seems that Wolves are going to set up like this. In the 3 games under new management, they have set up with this formation every single time.
Can you just let everyone know that is on the system?
So yeah, for those that are listening, they've got a back 3. They've got their wing backs, which are preferably and lethally Semenyo and Aït-Nouri, which are lethal wing backs. They love to bomb forward. And then they've got their 2 in midfield alongside those wing backs. And then they play 1 up top and 2 behind. So quite similar to us having Wood up the top and then having our Callum Hudson-Odoi and Alanga on either side. Interestingly enough, they are already weakened, right? So we've talked about Cunha being banned, and I don't think we can really underestimate how much damage that does to their team. It's effectively like taking Wood out of our team, I would say. And if you have a look at all that's been good in those 3 games that they've played, they've scored. Well, he didn't really play, came off early in Spurs, but the Leicester and the Man U game, he was involved in 3 out of 5 of their goals. In the last quarter, of the season, so we've done half, but this last half of half, he has been involved in 53% of their goals they have scored, and he scored 9. So pulling that out of their team is literally like just us pulling Wood out of our team. It is really quite catastrophic. They don't have Pablo Sarabia, right? And he is definitely out. Interestingly, their 2 clean sheets came with Totti Gomez being at the centre of their defence, right? He is out. And he was out for the Spurs game and they leaked 2 goals. Now, Spurs are good at scoring, but definitely him being out is a massive hindrance because you look at their others like Doherty and Dawson are not overly mobile as the 2 that sit on either side. So that offers quite a lot of damage that we can do through our wingers. Now, the key one for me is there are a few with knocks that will really cripple their side if they're out. Neto in midfield, who is genius, he got a knock and is kind of 75% might start. He hasn't missed any of the games, but he did get a knock in the Spurs game. If he doesn't start, then I think we're actually safer with that kind of Anderson and Gibbs White midfield. Without it, Anderson is going to have to do a lot of work keeping Neto calm. Lamina has been out for 3 games. He wasn't even on the bench with Spurs, but he might come back, and that's a bit of a boost, but I don't think he'll be fully match fit. And Traore has been out all season. So they've actually got quite a few missing, but we know what formation they'll go with. They are hugely depleted. I just get worried about He-Chan a bit. He lit up the Premier League last season. For some reason, he wasn't massively under favour under O'Neill. He's back. he's now starting because Larson doesn't really, although he scored against Spurs, he really hasn't done anything all season. So He-Chan's been put in and he really knows where the goal is. And it might just be a bit of confidence of the new manager giving him that, like Nuno did with Wood, and you might see He-Chan be a bit of a nightmare, but it's the support that come from behind. So they are very depleted. I think this is a good a time, even with the new manager, to try and go and play them. We know how they're going to set up. For me, the biggest thing is, does Neto start or not? If he does, we need to really get hold of that midfield, and Nuno might need to do some tweaking.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Wolfie is with us in the chat. He says, congratulations on getting over to the 1,000. If you weren't with us at the start, Wolfie, I did say a big thank you to you. I'll say it again. You're a legend. Thanks so much for your support in getting us over to the 1,000 subscribers. Simon is in the chat as well. I think Simon was on FFTV with me. Yeah, he was a student at a school local to me. So I do know some of his teachers, I think. Forest Lion is with us, says no Cunha to worry about. Maybe a more attacking threat from us. Well, hopefully we will see that. Good afternoon to Tim from sunny Spain as well. And Gary's asking, is Moreno carrying an injury or is it just Nico's form keeping him out? I think it is Nico's form keeping us out. I don't expect Nico Williams to drop out of the starting 11 at the moment. So, I think Nico's risen to the challenge time and time again. Every time he's lost his place, he's worked hard, come back in, and again, I just don't see him stepping out at all. Time is moving on, so I think we better do this.
I'm a scat man. I'm a scat man.
Dan, you're looking far too cool with those Forest sunglasses that you got there. I love them. But over to you for your AI-inspired stats.
Yeah, I can't actually see the screen with these on. They were sent to me free, actually, from a guy on Reddit. So shout out to Posh Tiger 2014, who got these 3D printed and sent them out for free.
Wow,
that's wonderful.
I want some.
Forest community. I know. So yeah, the stats are. Wolves have got the third worst home record in the league, and we've got the second best away record in the league. So straight away, lots to be positive about there. As we've touched on earlier, they've got the worst defensive set piece record in the league, and we've currently got the second best attacking set piece record in the league. So again, some other things to be positive about. And they commit a lot of fouls. They've been a very dirty team, as we know, because they've got all these suspensions and things. I think this is going to be one of those games where they're just going to try and knock us about a bit. That's going to be their tactic to keep us quiet, I think, is that. And fewest crosses in the league. No idea what that means, other than they've got a fairly decent centre forward there, but they're clearly not actually playing to his strengths so far. They've been relying on worldies, I think, from other players. So that was the first bit.
Not working.
No.
Let's have a try.
Let's
try there.
Guy.
There we go.
There's Morgan Gibbs-White playing with his Wolf Cubs. Playtime. Wolves have conceded 42 goals, so that is more than double the amount of goals we've conceded, to put it into perspective. So it's not just like they concede a few more. They've literally been twice as bad or more than us defensively. 5 of those have been penalties that they've given away. Again, they're a dirty team. They commit a lot of fouls. 9 conceded from corners, which is, by the end of this season, they'll be pushing our record from last season of 20 or 19, whatever it was, from corners. They've only scored 2 from corners themselves, and they've conceded 3 own goals already this season. So just everything about their defence so far, obviously things might change under the new manager, is a relegation defence, basically. They've got problems throughout on the basics. So that was that one. And then goalkeeping, again, it kind of gets worse when you look at the defence of having a Wolf in goal. So both of their keepers, because they've interchanged between Sam Johnston, who we were looking at signing, and Jose Sarr. They've interchanged them, but they've still got the worst goalkeeping performance in the league. Be that based on the post-shot XG, where they've allowed 7 more goals than they were expected to, or just based on the save percentage, which is like 62%, versus Forest, which is 75%. So ours is 3rd or I think, third best in the league now for save percentage, and theirs is bottom. So in goal, again, it's another positive for us is that if we can get some shots on target, there's a good chance of them going in. And then the last one, which is the Forest players on their ski trip with a few Wolves there dotted around, getting in the way. So Wolves have they've scored the 8th most goals in the league, but they've outperformed their XG by 11 goals, which is a crazy high amount. So either they're scoring worldies, or goalkeepers are making howlers against them, which actually does seem to be the case, because when we touched on the Wolves keepers letting 7 goals in, when Wolves have played other teams, the keepers facing them have let 8 more goals in than expected as well. So there's some kind of goalkeeping like hoodoo whenever Wolves play, and that both goalkeepers seem to have a bit of a nightmare. But when you look at where they've scored these extra 11 goals than expected, it's all down to Cunha, which is in the bottom right there, and he's currently scored 6 more goals than his XG. So again, it's either worldies or goalkeeper errors. They've also got Strand Larsen there, who scored 2.5 more than his XG. So we know from when we played them, the only reason they got a point against us was from an absolute screamer from miles outside the box. They didn't really create many clear chances. And so far this season, they've only picked up any points when they've exceeded their XG. So when they've either scored these worldies or got fortunate is the only time they've picked up any points so far. Whereas Forest, and you sort of expect that, like if you exceed your XG, you expect to win the game. But Forest have managed to pick up 13 points, even in games where we've underperformed our XG, i.e. missed some good chances, we've still picked up 13 points. So in tight games, we've took our one chance, or, even if we've missed chances, we've created other chances. So I just think there's a lot of issues in that Wolves squad defensively that I don't think a manager can fix overnight, because I think they're in exactly the same position we were in last season under Nuno, where he came in, we beat Man U, we beat Newcastle, we're thinking, oh yeah, this is fine now, we're just going to cruise up the league. But those defensive issues came back round because it takes a long time to fix them. It takes a pre-season. So I still think that despite their solid last couple of games, if we can exploit those weaknesses on set pieces and things, then we still go into this very confident of a win.
Fantastic as ever. Thank you very much indeed. Danscape, time for a break.
This York shop is a cheese lover's paradise. Based on Grape Lane, the Cheese Trader is home to a wide range of beautiful specialty cheeses, including its scrumptious camembert and famous charcoal cheddar. Plus, there's some delicious relishes and chutneys to pair with your favorite bite. Not just selling it, the Cheese Trader offers a high-level, tasty and delightful street food menu. Try their loaded fries and hot cheese toasty, and their posh cheese on toast is sure to be the best you've ever had. Owned by Forest fan Stu Freestone, the Cheese Trader proudly sponsors Talking Reds, and you can enjoy 10% off every order you place simply by quoting Talking Reds in person, on email or through Instagram. The Cheese Trader and Talking Reds, cheesy as hell.
Don't forget, you can get 10% off when you quote Talking Reds. And I did have some of the cheese from the Cheese Trader come down for Christmas. And I want to put a quick shout out to my amazing wife, Evelina, because yesterday she took the cheese from the Cheese Trader, and there was 2 or 3 different ones. There was a blue one, there was a red one, and she basically made this pasta sauce, and she melted the cheese. And she cut up some of the gammon we had left and made it like into a carbonara. And it was the best cheese sauce I've ever had in my entire life. And so Stu Freestone's cheese, my wife's expert culinary skills, it was the best cheese sauce I've ever had. So what can I say? Get your cheese from the Cheese Trader. Absolutely fantastic. Right. Ricardo, Danscape, Raf, before the season started, we huddled together and did a marathon episode for about an hour and a half talking about pre-season predictions. So it's the halfway point. Richard and I were chatting about having a bit of a review as to what we thought might happen. We don't want to rewrite history, and we're not going to kind of rewrite everything. But Richard, you put together a little bit of something to take us through looking at not just what we thought might have happened and how it has turned out, but now are we looking to really channel ourselves to thinking about a pathway towards Champions League? Ricardo, over to you.
Yeah, I know it's mental to think about right now, right? But based off of the performance to date, I mean, you can't argue with the outcome. And there's Nuno Holt clutching that Champions League trophy on the screen at the given moment. Yeah. So yeah, he looks very pleased with himself, and I'm sure with the club at that point, because of course it's going to happen, right? So looking at our preseason predictions, yeah. So if you go and break this down to kind of an average points total per month, and then the cumulative total for the season, we basically said we're going to end up with about, an average 5 points a month for the first half, average of about 4.4 points for the second half. So a total of 25 points in the first half of the season, which is where we're at right now, and then 22 points for the second half of the season. That's our prediction, and that gave us a total of 47 points, which if you look at the league table for the last, I guess it's 2019 through 2023, so about a 5-year sample, you're looking at about 12th position. Most people thought that was pretty optimistic, right? So clearly we've obviously exceeded that quite a bit. So if we're looking at the actual fixtures, we'll just run through these really quickly. This is what our predicted total was for that first half of the season, basically first 3 months. So first 10 games have a predicted total of 10 points, so roughly a point per game. And then we're looking at, okay, if you rethink this just a little bit, not completely rewrite history like you mentioned, Greg, but if we looked at a few isolated matches, so let's look at January in particular. In January, we have we're saying we said it was going to be a draw for Wolves, which given our history, that doesn't surprise us whatsoever that we were going that route. It was an away match. We have historically not played well away. Well, clearly we bucked that trend this year because we're the best away team in the Premier League. So it gives you a lot of confidence, and knowing now that Cunha is not going to be playing, as Raf kind of talked about some of the deficiencies that you might see or things that are not available to them on the pitch this coming Monday. It gives us a lot of confidence. So just take that one game in isolation. Let's say we flip that to 3 points. The next match you look at real quickly is Bournemouth away. Again, knowing that we played well away this season, we played them tight at home. So it's not a shock to us that maybe we say, okay, rather than a loss, which is what we predicted, maybe we say 1 point there. Then if you go to something like Brighton's been on form. We were undecided. We gave it a 2-pointer because we couldn't quite grasp whether it was going to be a win or a draw. So we put it somewhere in between. And that was our predicted total for that particular match. So if you up that to 3 points, and then the next one is Fulham, which if you up that to 1 point instead of a loss, cumulatively, that gives us a projected 5 extra points just for those first 10 games of the season. If you move to the next second half of the season. Yeah, sorry. So then if we look at the last 9 games of the second half of the season, we're talking about April and May timeframe, right? We've got 5 matches in April. We've got 4 matches in May. So that's how it's broken out. If you look at our predicted points total, we predicted 12 points. So actually better in the last 9 games than the first 10 in terms of our prediction. But if we then go do the same exercise and we look at April and we say, okay, we're going to play Aston Villa. Well, we played them extremely well. We won in stoppage time at home. We're playing them away again. Historically, at least in the last first half of this season, we've been really good away. So let's say we up that from a loss to a draw. So that gives us an extra point there. Spurs played them very, very well at home. Again, we're a good away team. Can we potentially get a draw out of that? So that's what we're projecting potentially there. That's in April, fourth week of April, excuse me. And then if you go down to May and you look at Crystal Palace, who have not been on form for the majority of the season, they've not been up to what we thought they might be, at least that mid-table space. That could potentially be a win for us. So if you flip that from a draw, which is what we predicted, to a win, so we get 3 points instead of 1. Then you look at West Ham. We played them really well, beat them soundly at home. Maybe we get a win there instead of getting a loss, which is what we originally predicted. And then at the last game of the season, Chelsea, which we know played them close, probably could have beaten them right at the end of that match when we played them away. Now that we're going to have them at home to close the season, you might say rather than a loss in that particular moment, maybe we get a draw instead. We end up with the same result as we did it when we played them away. So that's a total of 12 points in prediction, but you add another 8 additional points from our preseason predictions for the second half. And so what that leads us to is when you look at the Champions League in the table positions, we're looking at around 69 points on average in order to qualify for Champions League. If what we just said happens, genuinely comes to fruition, that means we end up on 72 points for the total. Yeah, for the entire season. That will put us, again, looking at the table around for the that 5-year period, that puts us at a position of 3 to 4. Again, it depends on what goes on around us, and a lot of this can affect this outcome, but that does put us in contention for a Champions League spot. So I it's a little bit ambitious, right? But we were ambitious in the first half, just saying 12th. So from our perspective, we feel like it's not impossible, but it's very possible that we could potentially accumulate that 69 points, at least enough to get to that point, exceed it in this case by 3 points, and then end up going to playing Champions League football. Now you can question whether that's good for us right now, because we've got some personnel decisions to make, and we'll get onto that a little bit in the transfer news discussion. But that gives us about just under a half point per month less in the second half than we did in the first half, if we achieve those wins and those draws as we've outlined just now. So yeah, just trying to feed it, scratch that itch a little bit. And now that we know what we know from the first half of the season, what could we potentially achieve, and not completely rewrite, but at least modify or augment what we thought was going to happen in the first half, or in the second half when we did our
Thanks, Richard. Richard. That's really acute and really, really good, because my worry in the back of my head, being a Forest fan, is that our arses fall out in the second half of the season, and we do a Forest. I don't think we're going to do that. I think we've turned that corner that I've spoken about quite a bit. We are a different alien, and we have that bounce back ability. And we are, as you've touched on in your piece just then, winning away from home, doing very well. So converting some of those results upwards to either a draw or a win now seems, in my opinion, quite sensible, because we are where we are, and we know more now than what we knew at the start of the season. So, Raf, now you've seen what Richard's done there with some of those results and the thought processes from turning some of those draws into wins and so on. Are we going into the Champions League next season?
It all boils down to the last game at home against Chelsea, a bit of an eerie, familiar feeling from last season. And I think Chelsea will have nothing to play for because they'll already have their Champions League spot, but they won't be in the conversation to win the league in that last game. Therefore, it goes in our favour. As long as we don't have key injuries, we beat Chelsea at home with the City ground going mental from before kickoff throughout the whole game. And we sneak in the back door. But I think that will probably be the 5th position, which we are up to say 98% chance that the Premier League will be given that 5th spot as Champions League. And I think we will get that 5th spot by beating Chelsea on the final day of the season.
Well, that's a prediction I'd love to see come true. Danscape, you've been obviously in charge of the European Dream Tracker. So we have had an eye on the pathway towards European football with your Dream Tracker. So let's pop that on, because we've already been kind of thinking about the dream of traveling away to Bratislava, or in my case, Warsaw, because that would be fantastic. So, Dan, now that you've seen what Richard said and heard what Raf's got to say and putting it into your kind of mindset with your own Dream Tracker and so on, what are you thinking? Is Champions League just that step too far for us, or in more reach than we realise?
I think, being honest, I'm like Nuno. I'm boring. I'm just like, look, can we just take it one game at a time and see? Like, halfway for me, halfway is just not close enough to know quite what's going to happen, right? You know, if it's a marathon, not a sprint, and all that, marathon doesn't begin till you get to like mile 20 out of 26. It doesn't even begin at halfway, really. It's that last bit. It's about momentum. Somehow we've got to just keep this momentum going. You know, we've got to restrict it so that if we lose a couple, we win one, just to keep those points ticking up. And it doesn't really matter which games that is or not. You know, I think on Richard's spreadsheet, he had us not losing any of the 9 last games of the season. You know, and I suppose that to me seems like that would be a little bit difficult to achieve, to get to that many points. But at the same time, there's 8 games I look at in our remaining fixtures that are definitely winnable. You're going to pick up a couple of draws. And so that's going to get us over that 60-point marker easily, comfortably. So I think European football is comfortable, you know, as long as we have absolutely no disasters. But I'm just looking quickly at sort of Nuno's record at Wolves, and I don't think he's ever lost more than 2 games in a row when in his 3 seasons that he was at Wolves. Or maybe he's lost 3 in a row there. And yeah, so once he's lost 3 in a row, he's tended to lose 2 and get a draw. So the idea that we're suddenly going to fall off a cliff and just not be able to win a game for like 6 in a row or something like that just seems like, unrealistic. So the idea that we're suddenly going to drop away completely is not something I'm considering. In terms of how much we can maintain this momentum, it's tough because we've won 5 in a row. 6 in a row is huge. Not many teams win 6 in a row. It is title chasing teams that win 6 or more games in a row. Villa last season only won 3 games in a row as their biggest, winning streak, and they still qualified for Europe. So the fact we've got to these 5 is huge as well. Liverpool only won 5 in a row last season. Spurs only won 4 in a row last season. So at this point in time, we are a title chasing team in title chasing form. But let's just take it one game at a time. Let's beat Wolves. I think we can beat Liverpool at home, and then we can start to get carried away. If we just get another, 6 or 7 games into this season, then we can really judge it, I think.
It does beg the question, at what point do you start getting carried away? I mean, my son will say, look, you're already getting carried away. You're talking about chuffing Champions League football coming to the City Ground next season, which is absolutely mental considering that, this time last year, we were staring down the barrel of getting relegated back into the Championship. This time, 3 or 4 years ago, we were in the Championship, staring down the barrel of possibly going into League One. So, the turnaround is extraordinary. I'm all in favour. I've been worried a bit about European football. I've said it and I'll say it again. Get it while you can, all right? If it's there for the taking, because it might not never come around again. It might just be that we are hitting the purple patch now and you get it while you can. And I think as well, it's worth pointing out that we are doing what we're doing in a league that is still very competitive. I know Man City have had to drop off, but this isn't like this season when Leicester won it and everyone else had the worst season known to man and they crept in and got, pulled off, a bit of a miracle, to be fair. But this Forest team are going head to head and toe to toe with teams that are performing really, really well week in, week out. And it's a more competitive Premier League. So look, we're going to the Champions League next season, guys. So you can start not just dreaming, you can start planning your trips to Barcelona and you can start planning your trip to Madrid. You've heard it here first. We are going to the Champions League. It's January. The window's open. And so to get us to our destination, recruitment needs to be sensible. It needs to be very good, basically, in terms of who's coming in and who might even be going out. We've had a little bit of a think about who may come into the club. WT Analysis popped up something to do with Kawa Elias of Fluminense. He's a player who was going to feature in their targets for January anyway, and his name's popped up. And he's only 18. He's put up some really good numbers in the Brazilian top flight. He scored some goals for the under-17s at the World Cup in 2023. He's one for the future, and he may possibly be a player that the likes of Chris Wood would mentor. Nathan Joyce goes on to say that his range of finishing has been really excellent since breaking into the Fluminense first team, but he is labelled as one for the future. So we'll talk about him in a moment, but the other slide is Rudy Galletti on X, talking about Petar Musa. He's attracting a lot of attention. He's currently at FC Dallas in the MLS. Their price tag is around the 18 million euro mark. He's a striker whose contract expires in a couple of years' time, but he's starting to turn a few heads. So those two are players that have been mentioned, as is Evan Ferguson over at Brighton, who we know a little bit about, the Ireland international, young player, perhaps hasn't been given the chance at Brighton that many of us thought he would get. So, Richard, what are you thinking in terms of recruitment for January? Is it a striker and that's it?
I think that's the primary focus. Yeah. And there's a lot of different directions you can go. I know we've talked a little bit offline about different scenarios potentially that you could look at. One is, what's the status of Chris Wood? I think the top thing for January is to get Ola Aina signed. That's number one, so that we can lock him up. for at least 3 years because he's critical in so many ways, as we've touched on previously. But I would say yes, for the purpose of covering your concerns around Taiwo's injury history, although he's not getting many minutes, so it's not putting him as much at risk, but things can happen when you're that kind of individual, unfortunately, with a lot of talent and a lot of ability and still relatively in his prime. But unfortunately, he's just not been able to stay on the pitch. Chris Wood is obviously out of contract at the end of the season. You've got concerns over him, in terms of his age. He's now 33 years old. Do we think that there's going to start to be a bit of a decline? So as you stated, we got to get a point, preferably. I think what makes the most sense from a balance standpoint is to look at a young guy like Elias, get him in, because being a Brazilian youth, I mean, he's 18 years old. So by every letter of the law, he's an adult, but he has no experience over in the UK. He's got to assimilate. He's got to learn how to integrate. We've seen that with Murillo. We've seen that with Danilo. But you've got the infrastructure with players like that, as well as Carlos Miguel, to help him do that. You've got a guy like Chris Wood, who I think would mentor him, would help him learn his craft. And it doesn't put you in a position where you're expending a lot of money to get at, because if you do end up re-signing Wood, that's going to cost you more wage per week. Similarly with Aina, you're going to have an increase in wage per week in that scenario. There is Yuri Alberto, but he's a little bit older. See, I like the idea of someone like Elias coming in, because Nuno can mold him, and he's given an opportunity to slowly assimilate over the 2 years that you likely potentially sign Chris Wood to. So from my perspective, that checks most of the boxes that we want to check. Plus I think the great thing about Elias as well, if you just watch some of the film, again, we're talking about highlights, which always make him look, like he should be playing on the Brazilian national team right now. But he's got a little bit of versatility to him. He's a little bit more adept on the ball than maybe Chris Wood is, but he's got some decent physicality to him, and he's got some finishing capability like Wood does, facing goal. And so those are traits that Wood has, but you're adding a little bit more dimension to the position by adding someone like this, as well as a lot more youthful energy, and just, he's just starting his career versus where Chris Wood is. But yeah, I personally would assign Chris Wood to 2 years, but I don't think it's make or break. And I know Dan will probably have some thoughts on that too. But yeah, that would be my approach to it, is I think you target that position, but you do it in a way where you get a youthful guy in to help develop and potentially have for the future.
I'll just come to you in a second, Dan, but Raf, over to you first. Is the striker department a real must in January if we're going to make sure we've got the necessary covering? Can you see Taiwo departing in any way, shape or form? Because there's been talk that he might be off in January. And also I'm interested, and we haven't got a lot of time, so I'm going to ask you to kind of do this briefly. I'm asking you a load of questions and to keep it short. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Assessment of James Ward-Prowse and Alex Moreno, the loans. Any thought that either of them or both of them might be returning in the window?
Okay, let's go strikers first.
Yeah.
So very, very quickly, I think there's no succession planning going on at the moment in the striker department like we have in other parts. So we need to start getting bodies through the door. Them being under 21 means the fact that they don't impact our squad numbers, which is perfect. So getting an Elias in with the Brazil market is always going to be mid-year anyway, because of the way their season works, is absolutely perfect. Yeah. Taiwo is getting up to fitness right now. So he does offer the chance to have time and to give Chris Wood some balance in his minutes. We can't sell Taiwo in January, because then there is absolutely no cover and Elias will not be ready. And we don't want trying to buy a primo striker in January is just not really the way. Although Wood came in January, but it took him time to get up to speed. So I don't see Taiwo being sold yet. I see Elias coming in and getting 6 months of rehabilitation, especially if Murillo's only been here for 6 months as well. That really, really helps. But to load balance Taiwo and Wood. Wood gets 2 years. Next year is when we're in this summer coming. We then look for our succession top-notch striker that's like top 4 striker that's got like 85% of their potential realized. They can then load share next year with Wood. Taiwo's sold in the summer and Elias comes on a bit further. Wood, you can make a call then at the end of next summer. Is he is the new striker at full capacity to take over the lead role? If not, Wood stays for a little bit longer. We ride out his contract. If not, we sell Wood. The new striker comes over. Elias becomes the backup, and we get another under 21. And the factory starts like that. That for me is a striker situation. But what I would say, and I will not take credit for this, I think it was Rich who mentioned this. Jota is a brilliant, it might have been Dan actually, was it Dan? Dan, it was Dan. It's a brilliant understudy as a striker. We know he can head, etc., etc. So actually we need nothing other than the youth player, because Jota can be, if Taiwo's not fit, we put Jota up front. But that does open up the possibility of maybe adding one winger in for the right-hand side. That potentially might be the piece of work. In terms of depth, to bring in that space, if we're bringing in another winger, then for me, don't touch the defence. The defence is doing really well. You've got Williams, you've got Aina, but behind that, I love Toff, but he's not exactly top 8 material as far as I'm concerned. Moriera is still quite young, so we need Moreno as that excellent top level to have that. I think he stays. And also there's been rumblings about, it was James Ward-Prowse. James Ward-Prowse, if we can send him back, and I don't know contractually if we can or not, but for me, if Danilo's coming back, he was only signed to cover for Danilo when he got a really bad injury. So James Ward-Prowse goes back, that frees up competitiveness and people not even making the bench from midfield. And that frees up one space as well for that wing position. That's about as quickly as I can do it, mate.
Thanks, mate. Dan, I will give you a chance to have a chat about your thoughts. In terms of wingers, is there scope, do you think, for Nuno to want to bring another winger in? Sosa got the start against Everton. I thought did pretty well. I'd be surprised to see him go on loan. I think that they've got a plan of action in place for both of them. Jota's pathway has been a bit quicker than Sosa's, but Sosa is definitely a player, I think, that had he had more minutes, might have scored one of those goals against Everton. The rust factor came into it, I think. But the thoughts are that there might still be a Newcastle bid for Elanga. I expect them to come back in for him, if I'm honest with you. So I don't think that Forest want to sell him. And I have been quite vocal before about, I think I would have taken the money. I wouldn't take the money this time. I would want to keep Elanga in play. I don't want to sell any of our best players. If we are really going to be serious about getting into Europe, whichever one it is, you've got to keep your best players. Unless the offer is stupid. If it's stupid money, then you know there comes a point when you have to take the money. So where are you on Elanga and Newcastle? Where are you on a striker? And has Matt Sells completely destroyed any talk of a third goalkeeper coming in January?
I think the less we do, the better. But I think winger is an area that we can probably bring another body in that's a little bit more impact straight away into that first team, because I think Sosa's shown glimpses. But I think we are at risk if for some reason we lost Elanga and Hudson-Odoi at the same time. I think we would lose a bit of our current attacking threat on the wide areas. So I think it's not surprised that we've been linked for another winger, because that was always what Nuno asked for last season was, we need another 2 wingers, which we got. But I think they've shown that they're a little bit off that quality of first starting, 11 at the minute. And I don't personally think Jota is a great winger. I think he's much better in the middle. And I think we could get a better Elanga competition on that right-hand side in the market somewhere. I think we've been linked with that Turkish guy, Yilmaz, who looks like a solid kind of winger that would suit a Nuno system. So that could have legs. Striker, I'm not really worried about at all from a point of view of where we go this season. Understand what we're saying about succession and PSR. And, at some point we've got to have the next Murillo or the next potentially Gibbs White, someone that's going to be sold on for a big profit that's going to keep us topped up on the PSR. So I just think that's standard for any club now, though, is if you can find a target that's a long-term target, just bring them in when you can. It doesn't necessarily, that doesn't affect where we're heading this season in terms of can we qualify for Champions League or Europe. I wouldn't really touch the forward line. I would say Chris Wood and Taiwo, we've got to have faith that Taiwo's been coached by Nuno in the same way that Chris Wood has, and he can step in and do as good a job as any striker would coming in for now. What Marinakis thinks on that, I do not know. I'm sure he's got an ideal name that he'd try and sign tomorrow and say, there you go. And then for me, the biggest one is holding midfielder. That would actually be my priority, is if we could find a holding midfielder that we could sign on loan for a 6 months to fill that gap of Sangare missing, or as a permanent signing, then that's what I would target. And I would look for someone that can really compete with Sangare as that out and out holding number 6 midfielder, physical, dominate for when we go and play teams like Man City and Arsenal, as we saw, where we just took apart a bit too easily without a player of Sangare's style. So that for me would be number one position to sign. And I will give a very sort of half-hearted shout out to Vinicius Sousa at Sheffield United, who I think has got the defensive side of the game. He's got the stats that suggest he did well in the Premier League last season. He's doing very well in the Championship, and he might be someone that could easily transition, because you've not got the change of country and all that, and not a huge sum of money. And he could be a kind of a backup to Sangare or a competition for him a bit longer term. He's Brazilian as well, so he'll fit in with all the other Brazilians. So there's lots to look at, but I think holding midfield is probably number one for me.
One thing I do think is that there will be at least one name coming into the club who has never been mentioned previously, because Sirianos and Ross Wilson, isn't it? And the others that are part of that recruitment team, they obviously are doing a load of work behind the scenes. We're all talking about names that perhaps media are touching and filtering into us, but there will be names that we know nothing about. There will be links that come up last minute and someone comes in. I mean, the Omar Marmoush thing, no one was talking about him, and all of a sudden he was the main target. So they're going to come up, I think, with something that's going to surprise us. I think Marinakis is going to put his hand in his pocket. A leopard doesn't change its spots. Now he sees where we are and what we can achieve. He is aggressive. He is ambitious. He's going to want to go for it. I would not be surprised if Taiwo Awoniyi left the club in January, only because we're bringing in a seasoned, proven goal scorer, someone who is ready-made, someone who is going to come in and score goals, not an up-and-coming young lad, but I'm talking someone who comes in and provides that direct competition for Wood. I'm just suggesting, I'm being a little bit maverick here, that could happen. It wouldn't surprise me if that happened. And it wouldn't surprise me if Taiwo Awoniyi left the club in January. I'm not suggesting that this is what I want to happen before everyone starts giving me abuse. I'm just suggesting in my Greg ball, my Mystic Greg, that I think that could be something that happens. I think James Ward-Prowse will go back to West Ham as well. Danilo's coming back into the squad. He's going to have a big part to play in the second half of the season, I think. I don't think we're going to see Sangare again this season, personally. I think there's an underlying situation going on there. So, again, another big maverick prediction. I think if we see Sangare, it's going to be limited, and I think he's going to be out the door in the summer. I think Sangare has not been the answer for us. It hasn't worked out for whatever reason. I'd love it to work out. I just don't think it's worked out, and I'm not sure that it's going to work out. I would love it to work out. Please don't think I'm trying to be negative. Please don't think that I'm trying to push him out the door. But I'm just looking to make some really bold statements here, just to say, look, I think the owner has got his eye on the prize now. And that means the ruthlessness of being a businessman that he is comes into play. And you make things happen to get over the line. And so, therefore, the reinforcements are on the way, I think. I reckon we're looking at three faces in January is my prediction. But again, I could be completely wrong. And at the end of the window, when we're going to do our closing show and the window slams shut, it'll be different. We'll have signed no one, and off we go to Champions League football. But there we go. I had my little say at the end. Okay, Dan, you look like you wanted to really come in and say something then.
I was only going to say we've got another 4 matches in January, and you know how much the picture could change. Like if we win these 4 games, all of a sudden you get to the end of the window and you're like, right, we really are in the mix here. Let's go out and get someone. But it's almost like if you go too early and then you sort of drop off. You know what I mean? It's a case of sort of ideally just wait until we've played these next couple of games as well.
I think the business is going to be done at the back end of the window. Yeah. I don't think anything's coming in soon. Right, we've gone over again. Raf, closing thoughts before we go?
No, all good. What an absolute blessing of 2024. And I just really, really hope that if it's even anything like 2024 and 2025, we'll all be super, super happy. And it's just a pleasure of having suffered in League One and the Championship for God, decades, just to be waking up in the morning and just thinking Forest and instantly a smile being on my face. So long may it continue.
Danscape, closing thoughts?
Nothing much really, other than a prediction that we draw against Wolves, but we beat Liverpool. That would be my prediction.
Yeah, I did do score predictions,
Getting
actually.
out
So I will actually get score predictions. Raf, quick score prediction for Wolves.
I'm going to go 1-1, but actually secretly we win.
Okay. Dan, you reckon a draw, what you're saying? 1-1, 2-2?
Yeah, 1-1 probably, and then
Okay.
a win against Liverpool. I just want to get that out into the universe.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about Liverpool next week, week after. Richard Spray, my brother, my co-host over in Oklahoma. Closing thoughts, buddy?
Clean sheet. Another clean sheet, guys. Because Raf, they'll take it for the team and give us the draws as their predictions. But I'm going to go 2-0 because that's what I did with Everton, and that's what happens. And I'm not like a prognosticator by any means because I don't gamble and I don't make any money that way. So, but I'm going to say 2-0. I think we go with another clean sheet. That'll be the 9th one, which we continue to be the top of the Premier League for that.
I also think 2-0. I think 2-0 as well. I don't think Wolves are going to score against us. I think 2-0. We've got to go into 2025. We've got to get the first win on the board straight away. We take Luton apart in the FA Cup. We beat Liverpool at home. The European Dream Tracker is not just a dream tracker. It's an express train. It is on its way through Europe. It's churning into France. It's going into the Netherlands, down into Spain, across Germany, into Poland. We're on our way back, baby. This is Talking Reds. We'll see you next time.